All right, I think we are ready to begin. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's event, which is titled The New Normal, Looking Ahead to Job Search in a Post-COVID Labor Market. This event is held in partnership between Vancouver Public Library's Skilled Immigrant InfoCentre and WorkBC. My name is Mark McKeegan. I'm the coordinator of the Skilled Immigrant InfoCentre, and I will be the moderator for today's event. I'd just like to begin by acknowledging that Vancouver Public Library operates on the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And we thank the peoples of these nations for their hospitality. Certainly, audience members today may be joining us from beyond these three nations. And if you're curious about which Indigenous nation or nations you're located on, I encourage you to visit a website, which is native-land.ca, which I'm going to put into the chat right now. Through this website, you can access an interactive map and learn more about the Indigenous nation or nations you might be located on. So for today's event, you're going to hear from two fantastic labor market experts who will be sharing their insights into the post-COVID labor market. The pandemic of the past year and a half has challenged all of us in numerous ways and catalyzed tremendous change in many different fields. Though the world, as well as our local communities, are not yet out of the pandemic, there's still great value in looking forward to life after COVID and exploring how the changes caused by the pandemic will impact the labor market and job hunting. So this topic is precisely what our panelists will be discussing today. So right now, before we get started, I'm just going to take a moment to highlight a few logistical pieces. First, I'm just going to acknowledge that this event is generously funded by Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, as well as WelcomeBC. Next, this event is being held as a Zoom webinar, which is a little bit different from Zoom meetings, which you might be familiar with. Only the panelists and I have the ability to turn on our cameras and microphones, whereas audience members are not able to do so. So if you're wondering whether anyone else can see you or hear you, the answer is no. Next, this event is being recorded. Only the panelists and I will be captured within the recording. Audience members, as well as their names and any chat or Q&A contributions, will not be included in the recording. After this event, keep an eye out on the WorkBC YouTube channel, which is where the event recording will be uploaded. Next, during the last portion of the event, we're going to hold an audience Q&A. This is your opportunity to ask questions to the panelists. So at any point in time during the event, you're welcome to use the Q&A button on your screen to type your question. And again, we'll begin answering these questions later on in the event, in approximately the last 20 minutes or so. So you're welcome to ask a question using the Q&A button at any point in time during the event, and we will start answering those questions toward the end of the event. Due to time limitations, we likely won't be able to answer all questions, but certainly we will do our best. Last, but certainly not least, you are welcome to use the Zoom chat to say hello, to let us know if you can't hear us, and so on. However, you may not use the Zoom chat to share any hurtful or prejudicial comments during this event. I appreciate everyone doing their part to ensure this event remains a respectful environment. Right now, I'm going to spend a few moments sharing some information about the Skilled Immigrant InfoCentre, since the services we provide are certainly going to be relevant to anyone who is curious about career and job search. So you might be wondering, what is the Skilled Immigrant InfoCentre? Well, we are an online and in-person resource center with a focus on career and job search and small business help. Our services are funded by Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, as well as the province of BC. Everyone is eligible to use our services, which means people of all immigration statuses everywhere in Vancouver. And all of our services are completely free. We're based out of a building that may or may not be familiar to you. That building is Central Library, which is located in downtown Vancouver at 350 West Georgia Street. Specifically, the Skilled Immigrant InfoCentre is located within Central Library on level 4, and it's open whenever Central Library is open. So during Central Library opening hours, you're welcome to take the elevator or escalator up to level 4, and the Skilled Immigrant InfoCentre is located right in the middle of the floor. There you can get answers for all sorts of questions. You're able to receive free one-to-one help from our friendly and knowledgeable staff. No appointment is needed, and again, this service is available to all audiences. So whatever questions you have under the career and job search and small business umbrella, you're totally welcome to ask our staff. Again, we provide this service in person at Central Library on level 4, and we also provide it by phone at 604-331-3603, as well as email, siic@vpl.ca. We library folk love questions. Nothing puts a bigger smile on our face than a great job search or small business question, so don't hesitate to reach out in the manner that you prefer, and we're happy to provide that service for you. And we can answer questions on so many different topics, ranging from the very broad, such as, I want a job, can you help? To more specific questions. We answer questions relating to resumes, Canadian work experience, networking and finding a job, preparing for job interviews, determining what's the right career for you. We can speak to topics like education or training, returning to one's pre-arrival profession, starting a business in Canada, and so much more. Additionally, we provide community referrals. So we signal boost the efforts of various community partners that provide services related to settlement, job search, and small business. So here on this slide, you can see a picture of our bulletin board on level 4 of Central Library, where we share various posters promoting different services and programs in the community that can help with settlement as well as job search and small business. Also, we provide information about these programs and services on our social media channels, which I'll share on a later slide. Next, we provide more than 150 employment guides with information on different career paths and various other job search and small business topics. These guides provide information about so many career paths, including information such as job descriptions, educational requirements, labor market outlook, professional associations, salary information, and so much more. These guides are made by library staff with newcomers in mind, but these resources are relevant to all audiences, and they're specific to job seekers in British Columbia. These guides can be found in our physical center on level 4 of Central Library, as well as on our website, www.vpl.ca/siic, which I certainly encourage you to check out after the event. It's a really great source of so much information that can help you explore careers, find a job, or start a business. Next, we provide various workshops about job search and small business, including our weekly career and job search tour, which takes place every Wednesday morning from 10:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. This workshop happens over Zoom. It's totally free and open to all audiences, and it provides information about resources and strategies that can help you find employment. We do various events with community partners, including this event that we're holding today with the wonderful folks at WorkBC. All of these services are on Zoom. They're all free, and you can visit www.vpl.ca/events for more info and to register. So that's the information I wanted to share about the Skilled Immigrant Info Center. Here's our contact information. Again, you can visit us in person at Central Library on level 4. You can call us at 604-331-3603 or email us at siic@vpl.ca. Additionally, we're active on social media, and I strongly encourage everyone here to follow us on social media on any and all of these channels. We're active on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Following us gives you access to the information we share, which again, signal boosts so many amazing programs and services that happen in the Lower Mainland that provide different forms of support to job seekers, to people interested in starting a business, and then also to anyone who's new to Canada and settling. So strongly encourage you to follow us on social media. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. At this point in time, what I'm going to do is introduce our amazing panelists. We're quite happy to be joined by them, and I'm going to now ask them to turn their cameras and microphones on. Excellent. Thank you, panelists. First, we are joined by Christian St. Cyr. For over 20 years, Christian has established himself as a leading labor market expert. As publisher of the BC Labor Market Report, Christian advises thousands of career professionals throughout the province and across the country, and regularly works with representatives of business, education, and government. Second, we're joined by Louise Roberts. As lead job developer at WorkBC Tri-Cities, Louise works with employers and job seekers to help them with their employment-related goals. She's an immigrant herself, having relocated to Canada from the UK in 2009. And this experience enables her to understand the complexities of an immigrant entering the labor market in Canada. We're most delighted to be joined by Christian and Louise, and I look forward to them sharing their insights into today's topic. Before we get there, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to start with a bit of a poll. I think it's always great to start an event by gauging where the audience is coming from and what's their state of mind. So I'm going to launch the poll right now. The poll question is, how are you feeling today? You're totally welcome to answer honestly, however you feel. You're actually able to select multiple answers to this poll since we are complex creatures, frequently experiencing multiple feelings at once. So I'm just going to pause for a moment as answers come in through the poll. I'll just give you a few more seconds. If you haven't yet voted, I strongly encourage you to vote in the poll. Okay, I'm going to end polling now. So these are the poll results. The number one feeling that folks who are present today are experiencing is curiosity. And that's excellent. I think leading with curiosity is always important, certainly at an event like this, where you have the opportunity to learn a tremendous amount of information. I think curiosity is a great feeling to bring. Also, I'm seeing a lot of folks are happy and hopeful, which is very positive. I'm glad that you're able to bring that energy into today's event. Seeing that some folks are feeling a little sad, which is understandable. We all feel a little sad sometimes. Some folks are sleepy, which happens, absolutely. Frustrated, excited, 12% of the attendees are feeling neutral, which totally respect. So that's a great way to start the event, I think. It's interesting to see where people are coming from. I appreciate you sharing that. No matter what you're feeling, I'm really hopeful that you'll be able to take some valuable information out of this event that can help you as you look ahead to the ending of COVID and what life will be like after the pandemic, especially in regards to job search in the labor market. Okay, so panelists, thank you for joining us today. I prepared a list of questions, which I'm going to ask in order to get your thoughts about job search and the labor market after COVID. And again, I just want to remind the audience that you are absolutely welcome to ask any questions you might have to the panelists using the Q&A button on your screen. And I'll be taking up and asking some of those Q&A questions that the audience has submitted toward the end of the event, within the last 20 minutes or so. All right, question one. So obviously the title of today's event is The New Normal, looking ahead to job search in a post-COVID labor market. To lay the foundation for our discussion, I think it's important that we define some terminology, and I'm curious, what exactly are we referring to when we talk about the labor market? What does that term mean? Louise, I'm wondering if you'd like to shed some light on that topic.
Absolutely. It was certain. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the event. I know I'm definitely excited to be here for sure. Most certainly, it's a passion of mine in terms of immigration. I immigrated here in 2009. And I remember there's the complexities associated with some of those, having the availability to some of those resources, that I decided around about 2011 that this was the direction that I wanted to head in. So I'm very passionate about it. So for sure, I definitely understand the complexities associated, especially now. So really the labour market is the supply and demand of labour. So it is really looking at the intricacy of the employer's needs, what we can, what in terms of the local economy of the labour, and kind of bridging the gap together.
That's really helpful. I like the way you phrased it. I think you phrased it very clearly and succinctly. It's about the supply and demand of labor. Excellent. Thank you. I'm Christian. I'm wondering if you'd also like to share some thoughts on this topic. What is the labor market?
You know, it's a really great question. By the way, thank you very much for inviting me to speak here today. I too am an immigrant, but mostly technically, because I came when I was 2 months old. So I don't have much of an accent now, but if you heard me speak baby talk, huge accent. I just wanted to, what is labor market information is a question a lot of people never really ask. And I talk to career professionals all the time who are like kind of vague on it. And so when I talk to job seekers, I always say labor market information is when the economy, anything that happens to the economy, from business to government regulations to new laws, when that impacts on people, that's labor market information. And so to use an example, we had this Humboldt Broncos bus accident a couple of years ago that was devastating. And what that has prompted is that governments across the country, including British Columbia, has instituted MELT training, which is mandatory entry-level training, which didn't exist in truck driving. And the trucking industry looks at that, they say, oh, well, that's not a great thing. Like if you require this mandatory training, we're having a tough time getting workers right now. But the great thing is you constrain the available pool of truck drivers, suddenly wages go up and working conditions go up and benefits go up. It becomes a more attractive job for people to go into, and the trucking industry is able to recruit more drivers. And so that's a classic example where you see something happening just through some simple government regulation that impacts on people.
That's fascinating. I love that example. It's not a connection I ever would have drawn, between an event such as the Humboldt Broncos tragedy, as well as, kind of regulations, and then how does that impact employers and job seekers? That's really interesting. And so then, no doubt, it goes without saying that an event with the magnitude of COVID-19 will have had tremendous impact on the labor market. So I appreciate that explanation. I think it provides really effective context for this discussion. I'm curious, over the past year and a half of the pandemic, what sectors within the labor market have been most negatively impacted by COVID-19? And then also I'm curious, why were these sectors negatively affected? Christian, would you be able to speak to that?
I think the sectors that have been most impacted have been the ones that we all read about: restaurants, food service establishments, retail establishments, obviously accommodation, entertainment, recreation. Those are the sectors that have been most impacted. But I think that beyond the sectors that have been most impacted have been the workers that have been most impacted. And in most cases, it's been the lowest paid workers. And in most cases, those have been women, immigrants, Indigenous Canadians, people with disabilities. And so this whole pandemic, as opposed to something like the 2009 economic crash, this pandemic has really affected the people who are really sort of struggling to be able to make it in the labor market in the first place. And I think a lesson that we could take out of this, because you said, why has it happened, is that I think people need to look out for number one first, that people need to go from this pandemic and say, am I in an industry or am I in a job that could be easily cast aside by the pandemic?
Yeah.
Interesting. Louise.
Yeah, and I would second on that. I think definitely an observation that we've made is the marginalized populations have just become even more marginalized. So what intensive supports can we provide to be able to move those individuals in the right direction? So certainly, you know, we've been looking at that. I think, and you'll attest to this, Christian, a lot of employers are really, in terms of the shortage of labour, they're really having to innovatively look at ways to do things differently. And that's where we can bridge the gap between some of those marginalised groups and the employer groups to be able to support both criteria. But absolutely, 100%.
That's very helpful, and I appreciate that emphasis on the groups that have been disproportionately impacted by the challenges of the pandemic. It's really insightful, and certainly, yeah, women, Indigenous Canadians, immigrants are very highly represented among those entry-level workers who found themselves in a very precarious position throughout the pandemic and especially toward the beginning of it. The flip side of everything we've discussed is that some sectors have actually remained fairly steady or even undergone growth during COVID-19. Louise, I'm wondering if this is something you'd be able to speak to. What sectors have demonstrated the greatest resiliency during COVID-19?
Absolutely. Manufacturing is stronger than ever, actually, especially within the Tri-Cities, where it's demonstrated quite a lot with many of the employers that we're currently working with. Finance, insurance, all of those sustainable industries that have been recruiting evidently throughout the pandemic. And so it's interesting for us as job developers within the Tri-Cities because, you know, speaking to many of the employers, it's not necessarily the employers that are struggling to hire, it's finding the people to work for the employers. So now we're faced with a challenge of finding some of these industries that have not been affected by COVID. You know, people and employers are saying, just bring me warm bodies, bring me people, I can train, you know. So we've definitely had a huge shift in the way things were the last 4 years, you know, certainly since I've been in the industry. So yeah, we've had a lot of growth. Christian can add to any more of the sectors that he's seen booming, but certainly the gig economy has definitely been booming. You know, we're finding that many of the employers are looking for, you know, the opportunities where people can stay at home and not have to leave the house, right? Contract workers, individuals not necessarily having to be on permanent contracts. So that there are definitely a lot of industries that have and are booming for sure. But definitely in terms of the Tri-Cities, we see manufacturing as there's huge growth everywhere actually at the minute. So we're really excited by that.
That's really helpful, Louise. And you used a term which you did sort of define, which is gig economy. I'm wondering if you could just elaborate on that, just for folks who might not be familiar with the gig economy.
Yeah, Christian, you elaborate a little bit because I know you've written a report on this. I was reading it yesterday, actually, so it's very interesting.
Yeah, essentially the gig economy is this. We've always had contractors. You know, you have tradespeople who come to your home to fix things, or we've had people who work in universities and do research, and so people are paid a block sum to do some work, and they go on to the next job. But we have this whole new emerging area of work, which is, it's not as long-term as traditional contract employment. It's not quite often as lucrative as traditional contract work, and it's quite often rooted in technology. So Uber and Uber Eats and DoorDash and even Airbnb are these ways that they're connecting consumers with people who want to provide services. And it's good and bad. I mean, on the one hand, you have a lot of professions like marketing and human resources and counseling and HR, accounting, things that traditionally people might have been hired to do those jobs for a company, and now they can just sort of sell their wares to whomever they want, to the highest bidder. And the gig economy really works in a situation like that. But what they're also finding is with a lot of these app-based jobs that people are not earning enough to be able to make a living off of it. Driving for Uber is great if you have a full-time job and you're looking for a little bit of supplemental income, but you're not going to make, quite often you're not going to make as much if you're driving full-time for Uber as you would if you were just a taxi driver. And so it's this challenging area. And I think the people who are interested in this gig economy need to go out and do a little bit of exploration about self-employment. Most WorkBC centers in British Columbia, certainly the ones that the Y operates, have specialized interventions that they can connect people with, specialized training in self-employment, which I think is terrific. But just things to consider like workers' compensation and ICBC, what's the impact on ICBC, and tax withholding PST or GST, or even getting the right licensing. There's lots of potential pitfalls in the gig economy, and I think people really need to become educated about it.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely, it's interesting times though, for sure. Definitely, you know.
Certainly, and so do we expect over the next several months, as the economy continues to recover, hopefully, and as COVID-19 restrictions lift, how do we think that will impact the gig economy? Christian?
Yeah, no, I think we're getting back to it. I've not known, you know, we've gone to this pandemic. I remember early in the pandemic, back in March, April of last year, you saw a lot of the economic forecasting organizations, and they said, well, you know, the summer's going to be rough, but as we get into the fall, it'll be fine, and by next winter, the economy will be back on track. And obviously, that did not happen because no one knew what to expect. And I've spent the better part of the last year thinking, okay, well, this ends one of two ways: either a booming economy or a complete economic collapse, when we realize that whole industries in British Columbia have been devastated. And I'm going to go for the former. Everything that I see now indicates that employers are going to come back more ready to hire than ever, that industries are going to be back in an investment phase, that people are going to be looking to hire. But I will say that there will be some lasting impacts on specific jobs. Like, I think a lot of clerical jobs have been kind of devastated through the pandemic and may not come back again. I think that a lot of food service and accommodation employers have automated processes where they would have once upon a time had an employee in there. You just go up to any one of our ski resorts here in Metro Vancouver, and there's a lot of staff who, you know, rent skis and take food orders. And so many of those processes can be automated, and then you don't have to worry about transmission. And so I think we're coming back to a stronger labor market, but certainly a changed labor market.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think just even within finance, I'm finding a lot of employers that I'm working with are, you know, they're expecting more. Right, so they're doing more of a hybrid role. They're looking for finance individuals that can do administration at the same time. So they're doubling the task, that the pay stays the same. So, you know, companies are having to really work innovatively to try and determine how, you know, they can make things work within their organizations as well, right? But certainly, yeah, I've noticed that definitely that clerical roles, again, there's been a real shortage over the last year and a half for sure.
You know, Louise, you have a great point there about finance, because I look at the two strongest occupational groups throughout the pandemic have been professional services, which is like technology, and professionals like lawyers and accountants and bookkeepers. And it's also like scientists and technology workers. And then you have what they call FIRE, which is finance, insurance, and real estate. And both of those sectors have done really well, but both of those sectors have typically allowed people to work from home. Yeah. And so in the finance sector, the people who've been allowed to work from home are the account managers and the loan officers and the investment professionals. Meanwhile, the banks have laid off large numbers of tellers. And so that's how we see this change happening.
Absolutely. Yep. I couldn't agree more, Christian. Absolutely. It's interesting times for sure. It's very interesting the way, I mean, again, I'm just looking at my span of being in Canada, you know, the 12 years that I have, just the pandemic. And so, Christian, how do you think that will change possibly? Do you think there will be an influx of those opportunities that come on back into industry, or do you think it's going to stay the same?
I think we're looking at a much more skilled workforce. You know, a lot of people say that retail has changed, that what changes that would have taken 5 or 10 years to occur have occurred in just the last year and a half, because that's the way things were going. So there'd be fewer mall customers. There'd be fewer mall customers for smaller malls. Like you look at Oak Ridge or Brentwood or Metrotown, where they're redeveloping them as residential commercial destinations, as opposed to a little mall in the suburbs that just doesn't have that ability. And even those malls, like I live in Tsawwassen and we have a tiny little mall here that nobody goes to, but it's being redeveloped into a commercial residential complex.
Yeah.
So I think those changes are taking place.
I think so. And I think the whole mall experience, it's interesting, Christian, because I think it's going to be more of an experience, right?
Yeah.
The whole window shopping piece, people are going to be going in and window shopping, but I still think they're going to be ordering those pieces actually in the store, you know? So it's going to be an experience. I think, you know, individuals are going to be, Amazon is booming, obviously, as you know. So it's like you say, the malls. I look at Coquitlam Centre, and it's just so interesting to see the differences. But yeah, retail is so interesting right now.
You know, retail is a great example because you look at how, I know that Office Depot is doing in the States, but I believe Staples is doing the same here in Canada. And you think of Staples as being a retail company. You go there to buy envelopes or paper or whatever, and they are sticking with retail because sometimes people don't want to have something delivered to them the next day, but less retail and more service, computer service, postal and shipping service, printing service, even rentable office space and meeting rooms, because the idea is that they want to be more of a service company than a retail company.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. I was on a webinar with RBC the other day and they were talking just to that piece alone, you know, he was just kind of giving his thoughts on what the next few years are going to look like. And that was definitely a vocal point that he made. But yes, it is, like you say, it's going to be very much an experience of a customer. There's going to be more onus put on the customer service side of things, you know, less on the sale, right? So more on the product knowledge. Yeah, it's fascinating. It really is.
No, this has been amazing. I know you're making my job extremely easy. I appreciate you just running with this and sharing all of your insights. This is phenomenal. I just want to remark on the fact that I'm seeing some questions coming in both through the Q&A feature and through the chat, which is phenomenal. And I definitely encourage audience members to continue asking questions. And yeah, certainly we will get to those toward the end of the event. And one that I will answer right now is someone in the chat is asking, could we please share the recorded session afterwards? And yes, that is certainly something that we'll be able to do. And so then we've kind of spoken a little bit about this, but I'm just curious, do you have any other predictions about how the labor market is going to continue to evolve over the next few years? Because certainly job seekers are in a position where they want to position themselves with sustainable employment. And so you've spoken a bit about this, but I'm curious, like any other predictions that you can make?
Definitely from a WorkBC. Sorry, am I okay to answer this, Christian? I just jumped in there.
That's good.
Very rudely, not very British of me, to be honest. I definitely see, in terms of, you know, the WorkBC world and the employment services world, you know, there's a lot more onus put on that trainings. So we're looking at skill shortage. So certainly from WorkBC, we're looking at long-term, short-term training opportunities. We're looking more at those long-term interventions, the wage subsidy, the provincial and the federal wage subsidy, just to really open up the labour market for all people to get them back into the world of work. So certainly from a WorkBC world, you know, there's a huge onus. We have eligibility criteria that has completely been modified now. Wage subsidies and skills training is available for all individuals, providing there's a need. And the individual has exhausted the job search strategies of their own, either through WorkBC Services or independently. But we understand that moving into the world of back into the labour market, that those additional services are required. And so that's kind of a lot of the attention that we're looking at the moment in terms of employment services for the Tri-Cities and across the provinces. But in terms of the world of labour, what do you think, Christian?
Well, first of all, no problem at all, because if there's anybody who's more polite than Canadians in the world, it has to be the British. And I think that you're right on the money when you talk about like those WorkBC supports, whether it's wage subsidy or self-employment or skills development.
Yeah.
Because I think the people who are going to struggle the most in the next few years are people who are competing for an ever decreasing number of jobs you train for when hired, like entry-level jobs.
Yes.
There'd be an ever decreasing number of entry-level jobs. And I've seen that in the last 10 years, just that number of available jobs projected out shrinking, because as our workplace becomes more technologically oriented, as we start competing on a more global basis, as the gig economy begins to grow, the jobs that are retained are the ones that don't even have an expertise that you learn in a college or university. They're the ones that require that expertise coupled with the ability to explain that to your customers, to exercise empathy or creativity or problem solving or teamwork. You take something like carpentry as an example. And now anybody would say, any career professional, including me, would say carpentry is a great profession. Anybody should consider pursuing a red seal trade in carpentry. But if we look out in the future, the number of carpenters 10 years from now is actually fewer than there are today, because they're benefiting from automation too. Yes. So you think about, you have even technical skills like computer network technicians. And because of automation, their jobs are becoming more efficient in their jobs. And so the people who will succeed in technology or in trades are going to be people who go into management, or people who go into some sort of really customer facing role where they can draw on their expertise and connect with people in a meaningful way. And so I think people should use something like skills enhancement to go and do an entry-level construction program, or go out and do an entry-level technology program, so you can get in there and build that skill set.
Absolutely, Christian. And I love that. I love that point, because we're always talking about the long-term and the short-term goals. And in terms of, many of our immigrant population group that we work with, I remember when I immigrated here, it's challenging. I had a university graduate, a degree from a university in the UK, obviously, and then trying to enter the Canadian labour market. My first job was working at Thrifty Foods. I wore a tie. I looked very lovely, but really had to increase those skills, and it was all about the people skills, building, like you say, on the empathy, the active listening skills, the ability to build that network. And so, there's value in those entry-level skills, because it gives us an opportunity. We work very diligently with clients that, have been in roles for a year and then been promoted in many different management leadership capacities. So, those people skills they're paramount at the moment. Active listening, you can attest to this, Christian. Active listening as a skill at the minute is number 3. Is that correct, or number 4? Do you know that?
I believe so.
Yes, yeah.
You are, I'm not obviously exercising very good active listening. I think you're right on the money there, because I think about employers that I've met with in the last 6 months, like Service Canada, or a big manufacturer, or a transportation company, or even a retail establishment, like big employers. And all of them have put customer service, or the ability to connect and relate to others, as their number 1 skill, even though they're in these very diverse sectors.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
That's interesting, because you've spoken about retraining and upskilling, Louise, and certainly in terms of developing hard skills. There are many different programs. There's project-based labor market training. I'm curious then, what kind of options are out there for someone who is interested in soft skills development? Because soft skills can be quite difficult, maybe even more difficult to develop.
Well, I think that it's a great question, Mark, and I think that really does touch upon a lot of what Christian has just mentioned, is that it's all about that network, right? It's a lot about, we are diligently working with clients. We're working on the short-term and the long-term goals. And I often reference Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That actualization piece is brilliant. We all want to be there. And I encourage clients to dream big, but at the same time, we do have that physiological safety financial need that we need to meet too, right? So working on those long-term and short-term goals, yes, skill development is important. We will always explore those opportunities based on the need of the client, and based on the fact that they've exhausted a lot of those job search strategies and now, realize that they need to bridge that skill gap. Case managers will most certainly work diligently with the client to ensure that we do a diligent, I keep saying the word diligent, I don't know what's going on.
It's a great word.
To do career exploration, and then, we work to be able to approve some of those training packages. But I think in terms of the soft skills, and I'll get back to that, the soft skills, it's expansion of network. It's about being able to work with an organization that are going to grow some of those skills. And I've worked with many clients over my years within career services where they have worked as an entry-level capacity, they've been promoted into leadership roles. A lot of them are doing some wonderful courses, Dale Carnegie, and lots of sales programs, and and really have that acquirement of skill and knowledge. But I think have the capacity to start somewhere, right? And develop those soft skills with an organization that can support you.
Mark, I wanted to add something because I think you've really put it very well. And I've been never before first of all, I don't represent WorkBC, at least not right this moment. And I only represent the BC Labor Market Report in saying this, but I've worked in this field for 22 years. And I've never before has so much money been spent and available for skills training. And I'm sure there's lots of the 118 people who are watching right now who are like, yeah, but I'm looking for work. I don't know if I want to go back to training. This is what typically can be covered in training. First of all, there's vocational training, tuition, books, supplies, childcare, living expenses, transportation. It's not for everyone. I'm sure the WorkBC people who are watching right now are like, don't tell people that. Because it's not available to everybody. You have to go through an assessment process. And sometimes they need to demonstrate that you can't find work with your existing skill set. Yeah. But it is such a valuable resource. And it makes me so frustrated when I see people go from one entry-level job to another. Because as I've said, those jobs are the ones that are being segued out of the labor market with ever increasing amounts of competition. This is the time to get new skill sets, whether it's through skills training or self-employment or wage subsidy. And you should go immediately to your local WorkBC office to inquire about this.
Thank you, Christian. That was a nice plug there. We appreciate it. No, absolutely. It's very important. I think now is the time. The ministry really, there's so much onus put on those interventions that now is definitely the time. And we've got the resources, the financial resources, and the staff, the support to be able to navigate you through some of those processes. And like you say, we are really focusing on the need of we need to be able to identify the need of the training, but I think certainly it's hugely advantageous. So absolutely. Thank you, Christian. That was a nice plug for WorkBC.
It's heartfelt.
Thank you.
That is a fantastic plug. And I really like this topic that we're on about career transitioning. I mean, certainly upskilling, skills training, all tremendously important within the context of transitioning careers. And I'm just wondering, what advice do you have for someone who is wishing to make a career transition? Louise?
Yeah, again, it's, the reality is we want to be able to be as transparent with our clients as possible, right? So again, we want to be able to provide them with all of the labour market information. We want to be able to provide them with all of the tools available to them. But, it goes back to that training piece, right? It definitely goes back to that training piece. We want to be able to ensure that the individual is well aware that there has to be a need. We have to be able to identify a skill shortage and within their background, and then we could look at retraining. But there's a lot of opportunity out there. I mean, in terms of wage subsidy as well, like really we're working with employers to be able to bridge many of those gaps. That's what the purpose of the wage subsidy is for. We are supporting the client, we're bridging the client to an employer, we're doing a WorkBC match to ensure that the employer is happy with the training plan, and the wage subsidy is just as effective, right? So if we don't always necessarily have to look at long-term and short-term intervention. Training interventions, we can look at some of the other interventions that we have too. Wage subsidy being one of them, unpaid work experience being another, community attachment being another. So there's many different interventions that we can support the client transition into a new career.
In career planning, something I've thought about for a lot of years since I started off my career is that the first thing to know is who you are. I get asked all the time, what's a great career for people to go into? Well, what does that matter? I mean, it could mean nothing to you. It could be something that you don't want to do or that you don't have the time to do or the skills for. Like, what we need to know is who you are. And in Canada, there's about 30,000 types of jobs. The most weirdest job that I've heard recently was fish pathologist. By the way, if there's any fish pathologists out there, the BC government desperately wants to hire you.
What is fish pathologist? Can I ask?
It's people who look at dead fish and uncover why they died.
Fascinating.
That's
exactly.
A job for me. But
So there's 30,000 jobs out there. And from a labor market perspective, at any one time, about 10,000 will be advancing, 10,000 will be static, and 10,000 will be in decline. And so that gives you about 20,000 jobs to choose from. And so if you can understand your background, where you have skills and experience, where there might be a good fit, if you can understand what you liked most in the different types of jobs that you've done, what you're prepared to do in terms of the education and training that you want to get into, if you can do the effort, that's a big part of it, is people who are considering training, really investigate the schools that you're thinking about going to, look at their outcomes. How often do people go on to sustainable employment in their actual field? Do the legwork. I think that's the two pieces that I really think that are important. Is one, is understand what would be a good fit for you. Like, do that piece, because what's the point of doing the training if you're going to be in something that you're going to leave because you just can't stand it? And then the second part is, there's a lot of money at stake here. Do the work. Do whatever your case manager tells you to do, because it's a huge financial reward in the end. Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. And do explore some of those other interventions as well, right? So we really do want to, training, short-term, long-term training is, there's ministry money available, of course, but we want to ensure that there's other ways, the job search strategies, that the other interventions have been explored prior to determining that need, because there will be work associated with that. And like Christian said, we want to make sure that that's a very clear employment goal to support you, because it is a transition, 100%. Yeah.
And wage subsidy is a great example of that, because it's all training just under another guise. You either pay for training in a school, or you're going through self-employment. You know what you do, but you don't know anything about running a business, so you get self-employment training. And wage subsidy is on-the-job training. Is there a field that you want to break into? If you need a little bit of on-the-job coaching and guidance, wage subsidy can buy your way in. And suddenly, an employer gets an incentive of thousands of dollars for hiring you, as opposed to somebody else they might hire.
Absolutely, huge advantage. I mean, our role at WorkBC as the job developers, career advisors, really, it's about supporting a client find meaningful employment, right? Find meaningful employment in an area that they really are passionate about, like you said, Christian, but also sustainable employment, right? So it's having a plan almost, it's finding that sustainability to be able to support. And some of all of the interventions are great ways of doing it. Yes, we have a very academic way of doing it, or we have a very kind of foundational way of doing it, but both are equally as important. So.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you sharing some insights in terms of transitioning careers. It's certainly an intimidating prospect for someone who is considering transitioning careers. And I wonder, Louise, what are some examples of people who have successfully undergone career transition? Will you be able to share any?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do, for those folks that aren't familiar with WorkBC Services, the skills training will be approved, they'll go through training, and then often enough clients will be working with the job developers to try and support them in finding sustainable employment. So it's a really exciting time for job seekers. Obviously, they've just gone through school. They've got this wealth of knowledge, they're excited, and so they're really optimistic and full of passion and energy, and I love watching that. And so our job then is to connect them to the labour market, to try and find employers to be able to support them. And so, yeah, we've worked with numerous clients that have been successfully transitioned from one industry to another. One client that I can think of that literally worked within sales, wasn't happy within the industry, had a small family to take care of, transitioned into the finance industry, is absolutely loving it. She can't thank WorkBC Services enough for the support provided. She just reached her 52-week follow-up mark, and so she's So we, there's a lot of rewards for the clients and for us as staff to be able to see many of our clients transition from A to B, well, A to Z really, you know, and just be able to support them through that journey is hugely rewarding and life-changing for many of our clients, absolutely life-changing, you know, especially when clients, they've had the hope, they've had the resiliency, the tenacity, they just keep going, you know, they've done their research, like Christian was saying earlier, and to get to that place where they're finally where they want to be, it's huge for them, you know, they're life-changing actually. So it's wonderful, wonderful. That's why we do it, I think, to be honest.
That's amazing. I appreciate you sharing that. It's important, I think, to inform people, but certainly also to inspire them. And so then letting them know that career transitioning, though it is an intimidating prospect, it can be done. And certainly there are a lot of great supports out there through WorkBC.
And we're here to support, Mark. I think we're here to support every step of the way, right? So that's the key. You know, you don't have to go this alone. We're here to support you. We've got phenomenal team that can support you every step of the way, that are here, client-centered, that are going to support you through some of those difficult transitions.
Excellent. Christian, did you want to speak to that too? Examples of successful career transitions?
You know, I don't have as much individual connections with people as what Louise would experience in her work, but I think what we see going forward that is really people need to take from this is just the new opportunities that are coming from this. The very fact that we're doing this right now on Zoom webinar, that this has become pretty commonplace, that there are going to be more opportunities for people to work from home. I think about people out there with disabilities that keep them in their home who would not have been previously been able to seek employment. I remember reading a study a couple of years ago, and they said, I forget what the specific numbers were, but it was something like among women, the average commute that a woman would consider to be a maximum commute was, I think it was 45 minutes. And when they surveyed men, they found that the maximum commute a man would look at was like an hour and a half. If you create a much bigger circle, there's a lot more job opportunities there. And so it's just one of the systemic reasons why women are underrepresented in the labor market in lots of different ways. And there's lots of reasons why women would want for a smaller commute too. And so suddenly this creates a balanced playing field where people are able to compete for jobs equally. And people are no longer constrained even to the Metro Vancouver area. Now you have people in professions like finance, insurance, real estate, professional occupations who they could apply for jobs in Victoria, in Prince George, in Kelowna, in Toronto, in the United States. They're now completely open. I was speaking to a group yesterday of immigrants who were doing job search, and 3 of the representatives were from Brazil. And it occurred to me that if they're struggling to find employment here in Canada, perhaps they could work for a Brazilian employer, but live in Canada.
Fantastic. It is fantastic. It really is. Yeah, absolutely. I second that. You know, I'm finding a lot of international employers, a lot of international organizations. It's opening up doors. It's absolutely. And I think from an employer perspective as well, you know, that's challenging because, you know, we've come out of a pandemic, you know, clients or individuals, job seekers are really looking for more of a hybrid model where they can do both. And so a lot of people are leaving the labor market. So employers are having to change the way they do things, right? So it's, yeah, interesting times. Really.
And you work with employers all the time, so I'm sure I'm not telling you something you don't know, but I've always found that employers were very resistant to allow people to work from home. But as the skills shortage becomes more pronounced, as they become more and more desperate to keep people, that now the pandemic has kind of pushed this into the center of the room and said, well, are you willing to consider this or not? Is this the difference between somebody coming to work for you or somebody looking for something else?
Absolutely. Yep. I second that 100%, Christian. Interesting, isn't it? It is really.
Absolutely. And I just want to quickly pick up on something that you had mentioned earlier, Louise. You did speak about networking. You spoke about networking specifically in the context of soft skills development. Some folks here might not even be familiar with what networking is. I'm wondering if you can speak to what is networking?
Yeah, so
how did COVID-19 impact it as well? I'd be curious.
Yeah, and I'll kind of go back a little bit in regards to that. So certainly, you know, within WorkBC Services, we really try and look at, as part of job search strategies, you know, expansion of networks. Okay, so what can we do to expand our circle of network within that industry? And so there's definitely Many different approaches that we've previously suggested. Obviously, the pandemic has changed that somewhat, but informational interviews and really being how can we look at meeting with employers, and a lot of the job development services really taught to that because we were able to kind of connect the dots almost and do the direct marketing piece to be able to advocate for the clients that we work with. But we also want to be able to provide the clients the skill set to be able to do that independently. I do think that the obviously the pandemic has changed that. So it goes back to what we talk about. It's supported people in terms of having to stay at home. Job seekers are more reliant on digital platforms to job search. And so I really want to encourage you, yes, and that can feel frustrating, especially as a new immigrant. I remember feeling that myself. Encourage you wholeheartedly to visit WorkBCs because we do have the staff available on site to be able to support you with those job search strategies. Even if it's through case management, through job development services, we want to be able to reiterate those tools for you to have the confidence to be able to do that. Certainly because we're not quite out of the woodwork yet in terms of the pandemic, right? We're still kind of in the, we're not quite there yet. So please, I encourage you to connect with us at WorkBC. We can support you with some of those job search strategies. In terms of, I will leave our details, so please do send me an email and we can connect in terms of as long as you're a permanent resident and unemployed, then we can support you with those services. Because I do think, Mark, how do people job search in a pandemic without, what about the individuals that aren't computer literate? What about the individuals that don't necessarily have a resume or have a cover letter or have a network or know how to network? And that's where the marginalization piece is there's been this huge divide. People have just stopped. So as staff members, we really want to motivate you, inspire you, encourage you, but also provide you those technical skills to be able to get back into the world of work. So we're here to support you. It's a good question, Mark. It's challenging. It's been challenging, but there's always hope. There is absolutely always hope, 100%. And I know our team does an amazing job. The team have been working really hard to be able to support job seekers because, there is a financial need, especially now with CERB. It's kind of scaling down. That's going to change the way the world of work looks. We're going to have more individuals that are more determined to find work and have that financial need play a piece.
Agreed, definitely. And then also on the topic of networking, I just want to share that the Skilled Immigrant InfoCentre does offer a networking workshop. So if you are curious about ways you can expand your network, both during the pandemic and also looking ahead to the end of the pandemic, that workshop is called Networking in the Hidden Job Market. It's available for all audiences. And we're next offering it on July 27th. And then after that, August 26th. And you can go to www.vpl.ca/events in order to register. So I'm looking at the time, it's about 3 o'clock, and there is a plenitude of questions coming in from audience members. And so I think right now we're going to transition into the audience Q&A. So audience members, thank you for asking the questions that you've been asking. I have been monitoring both the chat and the Q&A field. You're totally welcome to continue asking any and all questions you might have. And I think right now, I'm going to start diving into some of them. So here's an interesting question, not something that we spoke to. Someone is asking that compared to the Greater Toronto Area, or even compared to other regions of Canada, in which sectors does the Lower Mainland have advantages in terms of job security and career advancement opportunities, as well as other opportunities? Christian, I'm wondering if you could speak to this, the unique strengths of the Lower Mainland and the labor market.
Almost fearful that you were going to ask me that because I study the Ontario labor market as well, and there's a lot of similarities between Vancouver or Metro Vancouver and the Greater Toronto Area. And some of the differences are, first of all, Ontario has a major manufacturing sector, so they have a business community that supports that that manufacturing sector. They're also the leading sector for financial services in Canada. Like they have such a disproportionately large number of financial services rooted in Toronto. And beyond that, you have a huge tech sector. We also have a huge tech sector. We have a large business community that supports our natural resources sectors. So forestry, wood products, manufacturing, mining, oil and gas. And so there's a lot of corporate infrastructure in Metro Vancouver that supports that. We have a really healthy film and television industry. I would have told you last year that we had a really healthy cruise ship industry, but that seems to be in jeopardy these days. It's a $3 billion industry. And a very strong tourism industry. I think those are the differentiating pieces. In all those sectors, you're going to find entry-level jobs like the cruise ship industry, but I would encourage people to look at any sort of entry point into any one of those industries as an opportunity to develop yourself, as an opportunity to develop the skills, do professional development, and that maybe that first job or a little bit of training that gets you into that first job is just the first piece of ongoing training. You know, you were talking about networking earlier. I think that professional development piece is equally important because it allows you to become better at your profession. There's nothing more, well, there's lots of things that are attractive to an employer, but one of the things that's very attractive to an employer is someone who's committed to improving their circumstances. No employer wants someone who just wants a job. They want somebody like Louise who's passionate about the work that they do.
Oh, thanks, Christian. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I'll second that. You know, it's so interesting when I'm actually connecting with the employer networks that we work with in the Tri-Cities. You know, the employers are just like, I'm not as concerned with the skill or the experience, but the attitude, like you said, Christian. So bring me the passion, bring me somebody that wants to be here, bring me that right attitude and I'll hire them. So it's like, it goes back to those soft skills. It goes back to that kind of, that passion for wanting to be there more than anything right now.
That's excellent. Thank you. And I appreciate that emphasis on fit. I think that is tremendously important. Someone in the Q&A field is asking about wages. That's not something that we spoke about in depth. They're specifically asking with clerical jobs and admin jobs kind of trending downward, no longer coming back. Are people being expected to do their own admin in addition to their original job? And how does this impact wages? Christian, I'm wondering if you can speak to that.
Yeah.
I think admin is becoming more, it's not just people are doing their own admin. Now they're turning to applications to do a lot of their admin. I think that's where we've seen it. It's not so much that managers and people who are doing the actual work are taking over the administrative pieces. I think that those pieces are being systematized. I think the challenge with clerical jobs is that we have just too much supply. Clerical jobs is one of the most common jobs in British Columbia. There's hundreds of thousands of people who do clerical jobs in BC, but we also have every college in British Columbia producing more and more people to work in the clerical industry. And when you oversupply an occupation, then an employer says to themselves, well, rather than hiring 2 full-time people, let me hire 4 part-time people. And instead of paying them $22 an hour, why don't I just pay them $15 an hour? I think that's the challenge. It's not just about whether there's demand for your job in the labor market, it's how much competition is there for that job. If an employer puts in a clerical job ad out there, they're getting 100 resumes. But if an employer puts out an ad for a restaurant manager, they're maybe getting 2 applications.
Absolutely. Yeah, I second that. And I think, you know, many of those jobs, you know, many of the, like you say, we talked a little bit earlier, many of those jobs are they're few and far between actually now. So yeah, they're definitely, but yeah, in terms of my experience, you're looking at anything from 17 to 22 usually, but certainly there's a shortage of those types of positions in the Tri-Cities anyway, more so now than there ever used to be.
I'm looking at the Q&A. I see another question that's come in. It actually picks up on the topic of retraining and upskilling. We spoke a little bit about the importance of skills-based retraining, and someone's actually asking, in terms of that, how do people find the money in order to pursue skills training? What are the opportunities out there for either free skills training or for financial support in terms of pursuing skills training? Louise.
So within WorkBC Services, that we I think Christian also, he was given us a plug before, so thank you, Christian. But we do We do provide skill training, so case managed clients. So first of all, we would request that you register with WorkBC Services, and we will register you on our OES system. We will then determine a need, register you with case management services. You know, I'm going to be transparent as much as I possibly can. We need to be able to determine a need, and we need to be able to determine that all avenues have been explored prior to skills training approval. So, you know, yes, there is government funding out there. I do encourage you to research the WorkBC website as much as you possibly can. I can send you the link, that's fine. But do as much research as you possibly can. But there is training dollars available, providing there is a need, and we have exhausted all job search strategies. But certainly please do, I will send the WorkBC link to Mark, he will share that with you. And please do just research WorkBC Services. There is availability for you. Yeah. So again, you know, there's that available. We just want to make sure now that you will be eligible that you satisfy all the criteria for WorkBC Services, and then we would move forward from there.
Excellent. I appreciate you. Yeah, Christian.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, I think if a person comes in and they're very skilled and could easily find a job in their profession,
yes,
they're not going to be a suitable candidate.
Yes.
But you have somebody who maybe has worked in healthcare in their home country and have a considerable skill set that's going unused in the Canadian labor market. They'll still need to demonstrate that they're not getting anywhere with their job search, but they might be very suitable for skills training.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And also, I just want to say, in addition to the amazing supports of WorkBC, another really great organization that I'm going to plug is Windmill Microlending. Their website is windmillmicrolending.org. They are a nonprofit, and they provide affordable loans to newcomers to Canada who are interested in pursuing skills training. And so this won't be a great fit for everyone, but for those of you who are interested in finding loans, this is definitely an organization worth exploring. And so again, the website you want to check out is windmillmicrolending.org. I'm looking at another question in the chat. Will there be labor shortages as the baby boomers continue to retire? And conversely, will there be more opportunities for older workers above the age of 60 in the near future? So what's the connection between age and labor market demand? Christian, can you speak to that?
If we look out over the next 8 years or so, we're looking at about 903,000 job openings, of which if you factor in immigrants, which represents about 27%, people moving here from other parts of the country, which represents about 8%, and young people finishing school and entering the job market for the first time, that's about 50%. So we're still about 15% short. And that's counting on the fact that we can convince people to move from their existing provinces to come here. And so there's going to be a major skills shortage. In fact, it's projected to peak out about 2024 when you look at the data. And so I'm going to say, like, in the next 2 or 3 years, we're looking at a massive recruiting glut where employers are really going to be very eager to fill those roles. I'm a huge believer in people who are mature, continuing to stay active in the labor market. And I'm not just, I encounter people in their 70s, I encounter people in their 80s who want to continue connecting in the labor market. And it's an increasing trend. Baby boomers are not like other generations. They like to be active. They like to be engaged. And what we're seeing from a lot of mature workers is just to stay involved. And I think about displaced workers like in mills and such, and they're intimidated by the idea of going back to school. And I would say, you know, to complete a Red Seal trade, to do, you know, entry-level trades training, or even to just do the high school upgrading necessary to get into entry-level trades training, it's well worth it if you're going to be looking at being in the labor market for maybe another 10 or 20 years.
Excellent, thank you. Another question I'm seeing actually a number of questions regarding specific sectors and industries within the labor market and predictions regarding their trajectories. So a couple that I see in front of me, someone's asking specifically about the labor market trajectories for environmental and healthcare industries. Christian, would you be able to speak to that?
Sure. The healthcare outlook is good. It is constrained by the fact that government pays for the vast majority of healthcare services. But I think what we're going to see in the next 10 years is the government will continue to fund hospitals, but we're going to see a lot more home care. I think we're going to see a lot more independent contractors providing healthcare services. And I think we're going to see people paying for a lot more of preventative services. I think in terms of like alternative medicine and just a lot of the preventative healthcare that goes on, I think that's where we're going to see a lot of growth in jobs. And in terms of the environment, that's an ongoing piece we see. The federal government is investing in creating tens of thousands of new green jobs across the country. So I think we're going to see that trend continue.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very exciting for healthcare because the ministry really has identified a shortage within entry-level healthcare workers. So I know we do work with Fraser Health currently at the moment, and so we have a partnership with them. And so what they're doing is actually, they're hiring individuals on, you said home care, Christian, and then putting them through school between 6 and 8 months, and then they have an opportunity, a job opening when they finish. They're with Fraser Health for a year contract. So there's great opportunities, and some of these organizations are fantastic. Fraser Health is a well-known, brilliant organization. And so for anybody that is interested in healthcare, it's definitely a great way to proceed for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you for shedding some light on the trajectory for those industries. I'm seeing that someone else is asking about BC film and then also video game development. What are the trajectories for these industries? Will these sectors work the same way that they were prior to the pandemic? Louise.
I'll let Christian answer that one actually, because he was talking about film earlier on, so yeah.
I actually have a brother. My brother works in the film industry, and I just see continued growth. There's talk of a new film studio in Victoria. It's gone from a $1 billion industry to over a $3 billion industry today. It obviously, in spite of the pandemic, we were able to continue to see continued growth. So I feel very strongly about that. And I also am just reminded that we are the center. We are home to the world's largest producer of video games, which is Electronic Arts. And so I think we've established a strong base. So I see both film and television and video game development continuing. But again, we don't produce the games here. We don't, produce the I'm trying to think of what you produce in film. We don't do the nuts and bolts. We do the creative parts of it. And so again, it's a highly skilled area. So I would say that people should be conscious of that. The one thing I would caution anybody about in both of the professions is it's so feast and famine. That especially in the film industry, you go from one project to another project to another project. I had a colleague and her husband worked in the film industry and was off for 12 months. And that's something that people can face. And the video game development industry is a little bit that way as well. So like I said, I think they're both strong industries, but I think people should go, again, get into a much more skilled area as opposed to pursuing something that's administrative or that sort of thing.
I'm seeing another person asking about the agriculture industry. Christian, could you speak to agriculture in BC specifically?
I felt as though we have this temporary foreign worker program, and I love it because it gives a lot of unskilled, uneducated immigrants an opportunity to enter into Canada, which they would not otherwise have. And so I'm fully in favor of it from that perspective. But I also think it creates an artificial element in our labor market. Because we're able to bring in temporary foreign workers, it doesn't cause employers to automate their systems or improve their technology, which brings up the skill level of workers, which creates more viable jobs in the agriculture industry. And because we were so reliant on temporary foreign workers for so many years, when the pandemic happened and we couldn't bring them in, suddenly the industry was in crisis. And so I think they're reacting to that a little bit by bringing in more technology. The agricultural industry has an extremely strong outlook, and they have a tough time recruiting workers, even to their most lucrative jobs. But I also think that the temporary foreign worker program stunts the industry, so it doesn't take the same technological leaps forward that you'd see in other developed countries.
And what would you say would be the longer term demand for temporary foreign workers?
I think they're part of our labor market, especially when we're 15% short of what we need in the future. And I'm in favor. I would not have a temporary foreign worker program. I would have a certain number of people who could enter into Canada based on their willingness to work in the economy and push our economy forward. But that is the system that we have, and I don't see that we can turn our back on it. I read the other day that 1 in 10 employers, or maybe it was 1 in 9 employers, employs a temporary foreign worker, which was very surprising for me.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
That's fascinating. And actually that dovetails nicely with another question that I'm seeing. Someone is asking about skilled immigrant workers, and specifically, do we foresee employers changing their job postings to include recognition of foreign credentials and education and experience? Louise.
It's a tough question, right? We have some phenomenal experience with many immigrant groups that come into Canada and you know, wanting to kind of approach the labour market and, you know, transition with what they were previously doing. Unfortunately, yeah, it's very difficult, but I do think, you know, with the wage subsidy, definitely, and some of the interventions that we do provide, long-term interventions we do provide, it's opened up that criteria somewhat. So now we've got an opportunity to work with the employer community. I do a lot of work within the small business community, within the Tri-Cities, and definitely, you know, we have an opportunity to be able to talk to that skill set, to have that training plan in place to support the individual with the wage subsidy and move them more into sustainable, meaningful employment. So I think definitely it's a challenge. It still remains a challenge, absolutely. But if they have the skill set, we definitely have more of an intervention to be able to support. It's all about the relationships that we have with the employer community and how we can support that piece. And as I say, the employers really right now are in the understanding that things need to change for them. They need to hire differently than what they have been doing. Certainly, I've been working with a manufacturing organisation at the moment that, you know, are looking to hire a colossal amount of employees, 20 individuals. We have a lot of, you know, immigrants that have entered into Canada that have very low link level. Maybe they speak English minimally, right? And so how can we get those employees to support these marginalized groups? And so that's what we're working with as a project I'm working with at the minute. So I think, you know, please, I encourage you to come to WorkBC, come and visit with us. We can certainly explore some of those options, but absolutely, you know, the things are changing, employing communities are changing. There are the interventions to be able to support, bridge the gaps for you at the moment.
Yeah, I think that Canadian work experience and Canadian education credentials preferred is probably the most accepted prejudice that we have in human resources in British Columbia, because an employer can make the argument to say, well, a person would need Canadian experience or Canadian credentials for this and this reason and justify it, but eliminate a whole swath of people who are employable.
Absolutely. So we try.
But I also agree with Louise in the fact that as the labor market gets tighter, employers are not as choosy. And so it doesn't seem to be as big an issue as it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Looking at the Q&A, I'm seeing more questions about specific industries, and you've been able to shed some light on these so far. And so I'll ask about now graphic design and fashion. Christian, can you speak to the trajectory for graphic design and fashion?
It's interesting because I said earlier that there's these uniquely human qualities that technology cannot easily replicate it. And one of those is design and creativity. So I believe that there is a demand for it. We're not a center for fashion. So a person's going to have a tougher time in Metro Vancouver than they'd have in Toronto or New York or Los Angeles, but it is a growth industry. It's not something that technology is going to easily replicate. I am a little more concerned about graphic designers. We train probably a little too many graphic designers for the available positions in British Columbia, but it is a growth industry. Sadly, it makes me think about something like web design. You know, years ago, web design or website design companies were very common when website design was a lot more mysterious. And as you brought in more and more companies that can help you create your own website, suddenly the demand for website designers went down. And the only people who design websites today are people who design incredibly complex back-end websites. And I feel like graphic design is a little that way as well. And so if a person's interested in graphic design, I would suggest that it might be a good fit if they're strong in self-employment and in sales, and in terms of helping their clients realize their ideas in a graphic form. That's probably a more important consideration than just the design. And beyond that, I would pursue the best graphic design program available.
Thank you for sharing that insight. A question that someone has asked in the chat that dovetails with something that we've really seen talked about in the media a fair amount is just the question of working from home and what that looks like at this stage in the pandemic. What are employers looking for? Are they wanting employees to be working virtually, so remotely, hybrid, or are they wanting employees to go back to the office? Louise, what have you been seeing?
It really does depend on the industry, right? So definitely I'm seeing a mixture of both at the moment. Certainly within manufacturing, retail, obviously the opportunity from working from home is not necessarily always an option, but certainly I think employers are having to be flexible with the way they operate their business, because I think they realize they're going to lose good people by taking away that flexibility. So it's an interesting time. I can't talk for all organizations, but certainly I'm seeing more of a hybrid scenario right now where employers are asking staff to work from home partially, come into the office partially. But I think that flexibility piece is going to be key moving forward. So I think employers really are going to lose good people if they allow people to be boxed into the old traditional ways, for sure. What about you, Christian? Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I feel like employers are being more flexible in terms of what they're willing to do. I think it's like the old days. I find, and perhaps you find this in your work, that there's some employers who are just ready to get on board and say, hey, what can we do? How can we make this work? And there's other employers who are very inflexible and say, you know, the moment I get these people back into the workforce, all working from home is going to be an end. And I think we have all those extremes happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And depends on the industry, on the sector as well, right? So I think, I think certainly for WorkBC Services, I really believe that the importance of being in the offices is really important. Those in-person services are crucial for our clients, especially for the clients that don't have the technological skills to be able to navigate through job search independently. So certainly WorkBC Services, we really do encourage, in-person meetings more than ever to be able to inspire people to re-enter the labour market. So, but it will depend absolutely on the organisation, on the sector, on the industry. But we'll definitely be interested to see next year what the world looks like, for sure, in the labour market. Yeah.
You know, Mark, I saw a question come in that asked, how do you become an employment counselor? Do you mind if I answer that?
Oh, go for it. That's a great question. I was looking at that one.
I've noticed just in casual conversation with different organizations that provide employment services that there is a huge shortage of people to go into career development these days. And if it's something you're the least bit interested in, I'd certainly go to any WorkBC office because they can give you insight into it. There's three programs that are three prominent programs: Douglas College, Langara, and SFU, all offer career development programs. And I think it's a great time to get into it because it allows you a lot of diversity. Like you have job development where you're actually going out and working with individuals and employers, or facilitation where you're teaching career development, or running a resource center where you're connecting with people, on the spot on 100 different things in a day, or you're doing case management where you're, getting to know people's circumstances and making recommendations. It's incredibly rewarding work. And like I said, I don't think I've ever seen the industry having this tough a time recruiting people. Yeah. And as I talk to the programs that do the training, they're telling me that all their people find employment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really exciting industry to be involved with actually right now. And I think we have a very strong, stable job market as well. So definitely encourage anybody that's interested in an industry and career services to visit us, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Christian. But yeah, interesting with that too. I remember back in 2015 when I graduated, it was the other way around. There was overpopulated amount of development practitioners, and now it's certainly changed.
What program did you take?
I was at SFU, Simon University. Yeah, back in 2015 I graduated. So.
That's a good program, Kwan.
Yes, I know. He's retired, hasn't he, I think?
I've heard that, yeah.
Wow, it feels like centuries ago now, believe me,
Only 6 years ago. Let's slow down.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you sharing that insight into employment counseling and career development. I'm seeing a question here. Someone is asking about a topic we spoke to earlier in regards to the gig economy and contract work. They're kind of asking for a longer term forecast. Do we think that the permanent employee is an endangered species and that all work will trend to the contractor model, which is to say that will everyone need to learn how to be self-employed in the future? Christian, I'm wondering if you can speak to that.
You know, that question is as much statistics as it is philosophy, because it really makes you wonder what the future holds. That's entirely a possibility. There's some people who predict that there will be no jobs in the future. And I think if we look back at the history, because everything will become automated. And I think if we look back at history, right from like the Industrial Revolution onwards, every time we introduce new technology, we expand the array of jobs and services that people benefit from. And so I feel as though we're looking at a perpetual skills shortage. It's going to go on for decades. And if there's one thing I could say in favor of that there's future long-term employment, is that employers are going to want to tie people down, that they're going to be able to say, you know, to get that loyalty, to get that commitment. And that's why I believe that there will continue to be full-time employment. I think it's where employers are trying to limit their liability, when employers are trying to get sort of their services on demand, you should question the motivations of that employer in the first place.
Absolutely.
And so I would say that that will still be a competitive piece for companies, and that kind of employment will continue. Our demographics aren't changing though. Even if we increase our immigration, which we are, we will continually have a skills shortage, not for 5 years or 10 years, but there's really no reason that would change unless all of a sudden we have a huge baby boom.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I'm looking at a question here that gets back to the topic of remote work. And specifically, the question here is what kind of jobs are suitable for remote work? How to develop oneself in order to be a remote worker, which I think is actually a very interesting question. Louise, would you be able to speak to this?
So what types of jobs? So definitely insurance somewhat. I'm finding a lot of the insurance industry is doing kind of a hybrid model, underwriting, finance for sure, account management for sure, and some of those sales types of professions is more of a hybrid type of model. But certainly, like the customer service piece, that, you know, a lot of employers want that customer service piece. They want that face to face, right? So it's challenging. But certainly, insurance, I've noticed, account management. Anything else that you can think of, Christian?
I think those are really great suggestions, and I think any job that you can quantify, where you can measure a person's progress by their output. And so sales is a really good example of that. I sold 18 policies, or I wrote and filed 18 policies, or I sold, you know, 115 widgets. When you can measure people's progress and see that they're doing what is expected of them, that really lends itself to people working from home. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And I'm looking at the time. We're actually just about at the end of our time together. I just want to thank you, Christian, and you, Louise, for your amazing contributions. And I think right now a great question to close with is, do you have any final pieces of advice or words of support or resources you want to plug for job seekers? Christian.
I firmly believe that where job search is concerned is if you continue doing what you've been doing, you're going to get what you've gotten in the past. That this is your career. There are literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on the line. Take it seriously. Really invest yourself. You know, so often people don't, only about 1 in 5 people pursue the services of a government-funded employment program. 4 out of 5 people go out and do it on their own. 1 out of 5 people go out and pay someone for services that are readily available to you in the public. And I think people often lose sight that not just WorkBC, but all employment services in British Columbia, these are people who are experts in their profession. Take advantage of that expertise.
Agreed. That's an amazing point. That's a statistic I wasn't familiar with. There are so many amazing organizations out there, different employment programs, so many different types of events and one-to-one services. Certainly, if you're curious about what kind of service within the employment sector in the Lower Mainland is a good fit for you, definitely encourage you to connect with the Skilled Immigrant InfoCentre. Like I said earlier, one of the main services we provide is referrals, and we're happy to point you in the direction of any of those organizations that kind of reflect what Christian just said. These organizations that provide expert support, and certainly we are most fortunate to be joined by one such organization today, WorkBC. And Louise, I'm just wondering then, would you be able to share any final words?
Yeah, just from a heart-centered perspective, really, in terms of my personal experience, the library was my go-to place, you know, so all of the resources that you can find will be at the libraries. I encourage you to reach out. You know, that was the hub of the knowledge that I needed to move forward within my journey here in Canada. So there is a lot of supports available. Like Mark and Christian said, not necessarily just WorkBC, but there's a lot of employment services available to provide you with your job search. There's a lot of training available. There's wage subsidy interventions available, the work experience interventions. So there's a lot of opportunity to be able to move forward, but please do tap into those resources. It's easier when you've got a champion to support you through those transitional stages than doing it alone. And I can speak from experience, when you've got somebody empowering you, encouraging you, motivating you to move forward, you know, you can achieve great things. And I'm a firm believer of that. So, you know, keep the patience, the hope. You know, we have some change coming for the better, I do believe, here in BC. We've got a pretty strong economy, but do tap into the resources, and if you please have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself, Mark, or Christian. We'll be happy to answer any additional questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you. That's a very optimistic note to end on. Christian, Louise, I greatly appreciate you joining us today. You made my job so easy. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your knowledge, and also I just want to say thank you to everyone who joined us in the audience. I have no doubt that this event provided a lot of information. We answered a lot of questions. And so then for those of you who were perhaps not hopeful in the poll that you answered before at the start of the event, certainly I hope that you have a bit of hope yourself right now. So thank you for joining us. Again, this event has been recorded and the recording will go up on the WorkBC YouTube channel. Additionally, I want to say that we will be sending out an evaluation email. We're always gathering thoughts and feedback about the events that we host, and so please do share your thoughts. I'm anticipating a lot of really positive feedback, certainly in regards to Christian and Louise and their expertise that they've shared. So yeah, I just want to let you know about that and keep an eye out for that email. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope you have a fantastic day and best of luck with your job search. Take care, everyone. Bye.